Welcome, friends, families, neighbors, countrymen. My name is Arky Shea. This is Basketball by Association. I am joined, as always, by Joel Cordes. Joel, what is up, my friend? How are you?
It's good to be back. We were out, a day with some weather-related technical difficulties, but it's good to be back for a full episode, and that means we get to jump right into episode 53. I am actually prepared this time with a number, and it's a really fun one, although it's it's an old school, dial it deep back into the NBA vault. I had thought about going with Mark Eaton, one of the original, well, I shouldn't say original, but one of the old school like NBA giants, like true giants. Dude was 7'4", and one of those Utah Jazz players like Adrian Dantley or Dr. Duncan Stein that just don't get enough love because they were such a small market. But this guy is from a big market, and he definitely had an impact on NBA culture in the late 70s and early 80s. But with a number of 53, do you want to take a guess on who this gentleman could be? He was known for doing some Shaq things long before Shaq did these Shaq things.
And what decade are we talking? Where are we talking?
Mid to late 70s through the early 80s was kind of his reign of terror.
Geez. I love when this happens to my brain.
I'll give you a hint. He played for the Philadelphia 76ers.
Yes. Just trying to get the name out of it. Daryl Dawkins.
There it is.
Daryl Dawkins.
The Daryl Dawkins episode, breaking some backboards, shattering some rims, and one of the NBA's original, terror dunkers, much like a Sean Kemp or a Shaq later, a Blake Griffin, a terrorizing dunker if you were on the other end of that. And this will be a fun episode. It's always fun to go back and watch his old highlights.
Joel, I'll be honest with you. We're too safe with our dunks now. Like, not necessarily with the dunks that we're necessarily doing, but the fact that there is no threat of shattering anything anymore. Like, there's not enough threat of like a rim bending and breaking and having to have the equipment guys come out on these giant ladders to sort of fix and level. We don't have enough of that anymore. And
of course, the NBA lore is that the breakaway rim was created because of Dawkins, right? And
right.
And then Shaq, they had to really rein that in because of the fining. I will say this. You're right. Some of the danger of dunking is out, although you still get absolute posterization. See Anthony Edwards of late. You still get that, but that danger factor was pretty real. You go back and look at some of those old videos, Shaq's dunk, in the Meadowlands in New Jersey. He's got Dwayne Shincy is trying to get to it, and I think Benoit Benjamin is in on that too. And that backboard comes down, and somebody really could have got hurt. Shaq even had one time where the backboard coming down kind of lands on his own head as he's getting out of the way. And some of those Dawkins ones with the glass, it's probably better that level of danger is gone. You know what I mean?
Maybe. I don't even have the possibility of that. Like, it doesn't matter how hard Giannis dunks. I'm not getting anywhere near that. There's just there's no threat of someone dying, and I don't like that.
We have the technology for it these days.
Yeah, it doesn't mean we have to use it. Come on now.
Somehow I don't think the Players Association is signing off on this. Bring back the threat of death during a basketball game, Arky.
Players Association has no idea what's good for it anymore. All right, I can fix this league in a heartbeat. Kidding me? I can make Shaq like the league again. How about that?
There's going to be some punches thrown. I guess that's what they want.
That's what they want. That's what they're going to get, Mr. Joel Cordes. Let's start out this podcast, if we don't mind, and talk about really the big news that happened since we've last spoken, which is LeBron James is now out for the Lakers too, out indefinitely because of a high ankle sprain, because of a hit he took on his leg against the Hawks on Saturday afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
And LeBron's not one of these guys who is known for, quote, faking an injury or embellishing so much an injury, sometimes maybe a flop, but not an injury, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And he was howling and wailing on the floor Saturday afternoon. And now it's going to be he and Anthony Davis out for the Lakers for the foreseeable future. And they're hanging on to sixth place by a thread right now, man.
Yeah, and no Marc Gasol yet, who's been in COVID protocols and is on his way back. So they've been short up front. They had Damian Jones in there on 2 10-day contracts and are not going to re-sign him. You know, first of all, that the Lakers are lucky with that LeBron injury that it was only the ankle sprain. That was one of those classic kind of football in the trenches type of injury where the offensive lineman gets rolled up or is doing the rolling up on somebody kind of on the back of their leg or the side of their leg, and you wind up with broken ankles that way or torn ACLs when the leg bends the wrong way. And that's really what it looked like when Solomon Hill kind of rolled up on him, and it was inadvertent. So yeah, they're lucky in that regard. But now you've got some major questions, and you don't have a lot of time to come to some answers. I will say this. I think the Lakers, they can hang in there if they can go 500 during this span. We don't know when Davis is going to come back, but I think he may be back before LeBron is. That said, LeBron has been one of those superhuman type of recovery guys here over the years as well, but he's also getting older. He's not completely invincible. But this is why you have Dennis Schroeder, who has been capable of picking up a bigger role in the past. This is why you have a former six-man candidate of the year in Montrezl Harrell, who has picked up bigger roles in the past. This is why you've kept Kyle Kuzma and Markieff Morris, both guys who have bigger roles, had bigger roles previously. This is why you've kept a guy like Talon Horton-Tucker, who hasn't gotten to play a lot up to this point, but showed big things in small stints, and why you haven't moved a guy like that, because now is their time to pick up the slack. However, as we saw the other night, once LeBron was out, they played okay for a while. They went through a major power outage, to steal a term from Jim Peterson, the color guy from the Timberwolves. They went through a major power outage where, you know, it was 10, 11 straight misses, and they got down big, but they fought their way back into it. And now you got to make decisions. Is Horton-Tucker able to step up into this role? Is Alex Caruso able to take a bigger piece of the pie? Are all those aforementioned guys able to keep you to be a 500 team in the Western Conference where you just keep yourself in the playoff picture? Ideally, you try to keep yourself in home court advantage. That may be tough all of a sudden. But if the answer is no, or I'm not sure, suddenly those guys got to go on the table too for what you think could be the answer. And the trade deadline might look a lot different for the Lakers here as they try to bring in reinforcements. I also think, as you and I spoke about last week, in some ways, this means the Lakers maybe shouldn't be waiting around for Andre Drummond. As much as Drummond could help them, maybe you're looking at a guy like DeMarcus Cousins who can score a little bit more than Drummond does in a few more versatile ways. He's not the rebounder, the defender that Drummond is, but that brings that versatility that the rest of the team is going to need to click on all cylinders. So there's a lot on the table here for Los Angeles.
Yeah, and I misspoke. I think I said they're hanging on a sixth place. They're hanging on a third place right now in the West. And I'm curious from your standpoint that Frank Vogel said that they have enough offensive firepower going forward, that they don't seem to be in need of that in the short term. Do you think that's the case? Let me put it this way. Do you think the Lakers are actively looking and making phone calls with the trade deadline coming up, 4 days from now?
Absolutely, and I think they were before this anyway. They're a championship contender. This is what contenders do. You're a buyer, not a seller at the deadline. But now the arithmetic does change. I think certain guys, like I said, if you're unsure, they become available, whereas before, you probably would have been fine with keeping them because you had LeBron and Anthony Davis in the future here to fill in those gaps. If you're not sure certain guys can fill in those gaps, it's a different conversation where maybe they're available now. And again, if Vogel is convinced that offense is fine, then maybe you do keep waiting for Drummond. And maybe Drummond, as a guy who has had to carry the load kind of by himself on some bad teams previously, is able to come in with a little more help than he's used to. but still becomes kind of your number one guy. My only concern with Drummond on the Lakers, and again, this goes back to last week where I said I thought Drummond would wind up on the Lakers, and the Lakers were my pick to come out of the Western Conference. This was pre-LeBron injury. The concern if LeBron or Anthony Davis are out long-term is that Montrezl Harrell is going to have to play a ton in this scenario. Andre Drummond is going to have to play a ton in this scenario, but playing them next to each other, you lose all sorts of spacing, and you're going to really downgrade what they can do when they're on the floor together. If Anthony Davis is back in the mix, suddenly it doesn't matter whether it's Harrell or Drummond next to Davis. You've got one of those two next to him at all times. And when Davis sits, then you bring in a stretchier guy like Morris or Kuzma at the 4. So it's just a different bit of lineup depending on who's going to be there or not. And again, this goes back to the Lakers have been coy with this Anthony Davis thing. We know he has typically been a guy who takes long recoveries, unlike LeBron, and recoveries tend to go on longer than expected with Anthony Davis. So again, a lot of this comes down to what do the Lakers know in-house? Do they really believe he's coming back in a couple weeks? Or is this like, hey, he'll be ready for the playoffs if we're lucky?
Yeah, the Lakers were getting part of I guess the second game of a back-to-back. They were taking on the Phoenix, and LeBron traveled with the team. Anthony Davis has been traveling with the team. He's been with the team, so to speak. So the team sort of stays sort of connected, and it isn't just a go away and rehab kind of thing, which is I can only think positive news when you're sort of looking at it. But before we move on, think about the injuries we've had this year to like top level guys, like MVP candidates that could have won last year or won in the finals last year and going into this year and this year so far. Anthony Davis, Joel Embiid, now LeBron James. I mean, it's a few. It's definitely
it
looking
happens.
like a different
it
MVP
happens every year. Yeah,
yep.
It happens every year that big names go down and then other guys kind of fill those mantles, not necessarily from the same team, although that's ideal if you're part of that team. But somebody else steps up and grabs the headlines somewhere else. It is a star-driven league. There is a ton of star power in this league. You look at the Lakers' upcoming schedule. They've got Phoenix today, New Orleans on Tuesday, Philly on Thursday. That's a tough stretch. Then you get a little breather with Cleveland and Orlando. You got Milwaukee in there, Sacramento, and then it's back on to Clippers, Raptors, Heat, Nets, Knicks, Hornets, Celtics, the Jazz twice, the Mavericks twice before you get back to Orlando and Washington. So over the next, month, basically, you've got maybe 4 games against lesser opponents, and the rest is against teams that legitimately could beat you even when LeBron was there. So
yeah.
This is going to be a tough stretch for them. And so much hinges now on both of those guys' conditions and what they can do at the trade deadline. If it were me at the helm, I would be thinking away from Andre Drummond if it's long-term injury. If it's short-term, then I'm still playing chicken like I have been and waiting to see if I can get Drummond on the buyout market.
Guess who has the longest winning streak in the NBA right now, Mr. Joel Cordes?
I think it's the Atlanta Hawks, oddly enough.
The Atlanta Hawks have won 8 in a row, which means Nate McMillan is 8-0 as the head coach of the Atlanta Hawks. And when they started this run, they were somewhere around 11th or 12th in the East. And now they have the number 4 spot by half a game.
4th place, baby.
Which just shows you how much one streak can sort of change where you look at in the standings right now. But what about Nate McMillan's hot start for the Hawks? And all of a sudden, the Hawks playing like real contenders and probably what management thought this team would look more like when they started the season.
All right. So first, I'm going to give Nate McMillan some credit because I really do like him as a coach. And then I'm going to pour cold water all over this winning streak. All right.
God.
So I'm going to be a naysayer. So here's the good news. They seem to be defending better with Nate McMillan there, and that's always kind of been his MO. They've only had one game where they gave up 120 points. They've only had 3 other games during the winning streak where they've given up more than 100 points. And in today's NBA, that's saying something. So 94 points they gave up to the Lakers the other night against Sans LeBron, 93 against OKC, 82 against the Cavaliers, and 80 points against Miami back on March 2nd. You can tip your cap to that, and it's not like Lloyd Pierce wasn't preaching defense, because he was. But sometimes you get a different guy in there who explains things differently. The scheme changes differently, or maybe it wakes up the players a little bit. We're like, oh, dude, Lloyd Pierce was a good guy and everybody liked him around the organization, and he's gone. The expectations are real. Like, management isn't messing around, and it just locks everybody in a little bit harder. And Mcmillan was on the staff already. So that all could be going on. But here's the cold water. And I'm going to give it to you in 2 doses. All right.
I don't need that much cold water.
It's a quality win over the Los Angeles Lakers the other night, but LeBron wasn't there for 2.5 quarters of that. It was a quality win to start the streak against Miami on March 2nd, but that was the second time you had played Miami in as many games, and I won't take anything away from that. Miami is a good team. But let's look at the other wins. Orlando, the Raptors, when they were missing like 4 out of their 5 starters, the Sacramento Kings, the Cleveland Cavaliers, the Houston Rockets, and the Oklahoma City Thunder. So if you're the Atlanta Hawks and Bogdan Bogdanović is finally back and healthy and has knocked off the rust, Capella and Collins are both back in the lineup now and have been in stable fashion for a while. You're starting to get some of those reinforcements back. You're still waiting on Cam Reddish and DeAndre Hunter, but they're coming. You better win those games. That's the expectation. So they did what they were supposed to do, but I'm not going to call those quality wins during this 8-game winning streak. Everything counts, and the Hawks needed that, and they weren't getting enough of those wins prior to this, and that's why Lloyd Pierce got fired. But that's part of the equation here.
They count, though. Like, do you know how many 8-game winning streaks have happened this season in the NBA? I think
not many, right?
Yeah, I think this is like the 8th game or more winning streak that's happened in the NBA, and it counts. Like it counts. And like you said, I think it's so important to point out the defensive numbers too, because yes, the Cavs aren't very good, and yes, beating a team like the Lakers without Anthony Davis and without LeBron James for the majority of it, it's still, it doesn't resonate the same as if you had everyone at full health. But still, to be able to play as well defensively as you have been able to, and to still be able to win those games in a row, like, it's super impressive for the Hawks.
It is, and yet
take your water back.
No, I won't. With Bogdanović and Gallinari both back and healthy now, and they had suffered through some injuries early, you have that firepower off the bench that was missing. This is why you brought in Rajon Rondo and Gallinari. This is why you kept around a veteran like Solomon Hill. This is why Bogdanović got brought in. The expectations are that this was going to be a playoff team and was going to be hunting maybe for a top 4 seed. And anything lower than that is, I guess, just the minimum expectation. They've got a long ways to go. Like, Reddish is coming back. Hunter should be back. Herter has looked better. So there's so much depth there that if they can get everybody healthy, it's a really nice mix of young team with lots of good players and fresh legs, but also some cagey veteran guys who can knock down shots. And then you've got a superstar in Trae Young. So they got a little bit of everything. It's what you need to compete in this Eastern Conference. But at this point, I don't think anybody should be standing up and like giving them an ovation as if we're surprised. Like, this is what they are supposed to be doing at this point. And so kudos to Nate McMillan and the Hawks for taking care of those games. It is not an easy feat. And like we've talked about, especially this year where everything has been up and down and lineups are changing, any type of win streak you can go on, you put that in the bank. You put it in the bank, because you don't know what your lineup is going to be 2 weeks from now. And if somebody goes down with COVID, and you need those wins. So yeah, I don't take that away from them, but I also don't want us to look at this and be like, oh my gosh, the Hawks are contenders suddenly, and Nate McMillan is a magic worker. Like, we're not there yet with Atlanta. They got some more stuff to prove to us, and it's going to come when they face quality opponents in big games where they got to close.
For the record, 5 of those wins are on the road too. So FYI, still doing work. Also doing work is your bracket this season. Your bracket may not be perfect, and basically it's not because no one else is perfect right now. But you know what? You can still take care of all of your hair and look beautiful for whomever you want, even if it's just you, by talking about and doing the right things. I mean Manscaped. That's what I mean. I mean taking care of how you look, son. Manscaped.com is the global leaders in male grooming from head to toe. So as the clock winds down in March, you beat Clutch. You don't beat Texas, and you avoid the upset with the Manscaped Performance Package to keep all of your hair tamed. Start taking care of yourself with a 20% off plus free shipping offer right now by going to manscaped.com and using the promo code BRAWL for our exclusive offer. BRAWL. Now, the Performance Package is the ultimate men's hygiene bundle, and it's #1 overall seed. Some thought it was Gonzaga. They were wrong. It's Manscaped's ultimate men's hygiene bundle. Along with the award-winning Lawnmower 3.0, included in this package is the Weed Whacker ear and nose hair trimmer. It provides proprietary skin-safe technology, which helps reduce nicks and snags and tugs in places you don't want nicks, snags, and tugs. Get the Performance Package now to get 2 free gifts with it. It's the Manscaped Boxers and Shed Travel Bag. Your purchase also goes towards a good cause. So why don't you go ahead and go to manscaped.com, click on whatever you want, put it in your basket, get the 20% off plus free shipping when you use the promo code BRAWL, BRAWL. Joel, Brad Stevens has said he is not going to take the Indiana college job, despite many people wanting him to. My question is, does Brad Stevens' message still connect in Boston? Because the timing was going to be weird if he didn't leave in the middle of the season when the Celtics were still obviously a contender, the team that could go deep into the playoffs. And by the time they were done, I mean, Indiana's probably going to want their coach before the end of the season for the NBA. So if that's not being the case, let's talk about Brad Stevens in the NBA. Is his message getting a little old? Because it's hard unless you're winning titles to keep that message fresh, to keep people buying in.
Brad Stevens has proven without a doubt that he's an NBA head coach. So unless there was that desire in him to go back to college and the very different game, where your authority level as a coach is far higher, but then you also have to do so much of the recruiting, whereas in the NBA, you leave that to a general manager. Unless that desire was there, I don't think there's any reason for him to go. As far as the question about the Celtics, we're not in the locker room, so we don't really know. All you can do is read the tea leaves. The wins are not there, but when players have talked about things, it's never been Brad's not getting us prepared, coach has made a big mistake, my minutes are the problem. You're not seeing that sort of chatter. You're seeing Marcus Smart kind of leave some really big tea leaves behind about certain guys maybe having to deal with off-court issues right now. And of course, for privacy, it was smart of him not to mention what those things are. But the fact that he would bring it up and then kind of expound on it for a while means, hey, there's something going on there. And we don't know with who or with what, but certainly this has been a very trying year for a lot of people for a lot of different reasons. And NBA players are human beings too. You and I have talked quite a bit about these Celtics and how the roster composition is just imbalanced at a couple of positions, especially the point guard spot and the center spot, where you've got a little bit too much of overlapping. And then at your wings, and especially at your kind of power forward position, it's a little bit thin, even though Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum fill those spots. And even though Marcus Smart is back now, though he's shaking off some rust. So I think it's not a Brad Stevens problem yet, but if you start to run into this next year, I think right now the onus is on Danny Ainge. It's on Danny Ainge to make some moves at the deadline, knowing that you can't keep trotting out the same group and expecting different results. You got to clear the path now for Robert Williams to be your starting center. You don't need Jeff
By the
Teague,
way, it feels
Tremont
like they're
Waters,
starting to
Javonte
do that.
Green, all that.
It feels like they're starting to do that for Robert Williams. He's getting more and
Yeah.
more of this time against more and more. And by getting more of that time, we're starting to see him get more starting minutes and more minutes against like the number one bigs that he's going to be going against. So it's, I think they're starting to they're feeling him out to see if that's the guy that they don't need to go into free agency, not free agency, but the trade market and look for somebody.
Mm-hmm. And I said like 2 months ago, just watching Celtics tape, that there was some sneaky chemistry being started between Peyton Pritchard and Robert Williams that was really fun. And other bigger outlets have started to pick up on that and write about that a little bit too. So now you get into a conversation about, is Kemba Walker really the right guy for the starting unit, or do you bring him off the bench for a group that has really struggled to score? Do you make him the sixth man and Pritchard kind of like the spot starter so that he is with Williams? Those are the Brad Stevens questions, but the onus here is on Ainge to make some moves, see what happens. If you underachieve the rest of the year, then you've got the offseason again, onus on Danny Ainge to get the roster right. But if they come out flat again next year, big market team like Boston, a guy like Stevens who's been around for a long time, then he is on the hot seat, and for good reason, because now management has done what they needed to do, and now it does go back to coaching. And if you can't figure out that group, that's where your job is in jeopardy. But I guarantee you 110% that Brad Stevens will have at least 2, 3, 4 more NBA jobs if he wants them, unless he has some sort of cataclysmic flame out at his next spot.
Mm-hmm.
He's not a guy who's going to have to go back to college anytime soon unless he wants to.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that sentiment as well. I just, like Boston under Brad Stevens has been like to the line so many times that you just sort of wonder, like, is there a message lost at some point? Does something like hearing the same thing over and over again when you can't get over the ultimate hump and get to the finals and win the Larry O'Brien, if that's something that sort of nags not at just him but at the sort of overall cohesiveness of the team? And it's probably not that necessarily the case, but I mean, he's no spring chicken there. And you're right about Danny Ainge. In fact, I don't remember if we talked about this recently, but it's been I think it's 6 years since Danny Ainge has made a trade deadline move for Boston.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like if you're a Boston fan, you're sort of looking at this team and saying, give us something. We need something. We need a boost. You can't just sit here this year if we're going to be able to contend, because I had the standings up for a second. I don't even know where they're at right now. But we're just going to middle if we stay here. Like, we're not going to be able to win the East.
Boston is the 8th seed right now.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Like we're not going to win the East unless you do something. But then again, let me ask you this, Joel. Is there something Danny Ainge could do this year that could, considering how top heavy that East is, that could make them not only Eastern Conference finalists, but get them over a Milwaukee or a Brooklyn at the top end of that? Maybe a Philly.
Harrison Barnes is the guy who is being floated out there as like a major trade target for them. He's playing on the Kings right now. Most people remember him, from his Warriors days early on. He was a big part of their initial rise. Played some good minutes in Dallas for a while too.
But does Harrison Barnes elevate that team to that degree?
Harrison Barnes is the type of guy that they need because he is long. He's another defender. He can be a lead defender at times. He can knock down shots. He still has plenty of athleticism. So on the surface, Boston fans and those who are panicking at this are going to go, we need some sort of landmark trade, some huge name. You're not going to get that. Kemba Walker is not going to fetch that, even though the Celtics have tons of picks. That's not walking through the door right now. Could you get in on the Victor Oladipo sweepstakes? Yeah, maybe, but do you really want to roll the dice on Oladipo's health and pending contract when you might still have Kemba Walker in that mix too? And now your whole backcourt has major injury issues. So I don't know about that. I do think what Boston needs really is not so much the shot in the arm from the landmark name, but a guy like Barnes and then maybe one or two other pieces of just reinforcements for the bench quality veteran guys that are going to get you shots and stops, and they're going to fill in some of the gaps so that Tatum and Brown are not having to do so much. We've talked about them before, so that Kemba Walker can slide into a role where on nights he's your third scorer. That's awesome, but that's icing on the cake. He doesn't have to be that every night. Get him into a role maybe as the sixth man, where he can provide you some firepower, but it's not hoping that he's your big three, especially because of the defensive issues. But there again, that's why you have Marcus Smart to try to cover up some of that. So I don't think they're that far away. It is a matter of whose head is in the right place right now. And, if somebody's dealing with something major off the court and just isn't plugged in, I'm sorry, folks, the trade deadline is not going to fix that.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting point that you bring up that, yes, we mentioned a bunch of times on this podcast that Danny Ainge has 1,000 picks just sticking around. But those aren't high-level assets to make this blockbuster trade that did sort of put you over that hump. Like, this isn't a bunch of like lottery picks that you're dealing with that you can just give to people. This is a lot of second-round dudes, and there's a lot of second-round picks that you can package for smaller deals going forward, not necessarily a blockbuster to bring you in somebody who's going to be able to push you to the Eastern Conference Championship.
And they don't have the cap space to make one of those deals anyway, unless they're giving up on one of Brown or Tatum, which isn't happening anytime soon.
No.
And the guys on the buyout market right now, like we spoke about last week, are almost all centers. So if you're going to bring in another center, then what are you doing to Robert Williams? Is he really your guy? And it looks like they want him to be that guy. I think he can be that guy, but you don't want to stunt that growth or sour that relationship when you've been kind of laying the runway out for him to land on it. You don't pull the rug out then during that moment. But you might also look at it too and say, we can get somebody who's going to be a major upgrade, and we include Robert Williams in that type of a deal. I don't think anybody's untouchable. It's just that when you've got a young up-and-comer like Robert Williams who's playing for cheap, that's the best asset in the league. Like, yeah, you could dangle that asset in trade, but that's your best asset to have a guy who's playing like a bigger contract player who's not in that big contract yet.
Okay, yes or no? Boston makes a trade deadline move.
Yes, absolutely has to. And if they don't, I think you honestly look at firing Danny Ainge this offseason and getting a new general manager.
See, I think they have to too, but I don't think they make a move. Like, I think the area that they're looking to upgrade in, I think they're going to trust the sort of development of Robert Williams. So that's what I think they're going to, at least that's what's trending towards. Who knows where we are in a couple of days. And
no, I think they get Barnes and they pick up one other veteran for that bench. Okay. It won't be sexy, but it'll be hopefully enough to get them, back into a 4th through 6th seed.
And it'll count as a move, and Joel will be correct. Speaking of moves, PJ Tucker is no longer on the Houston really bad Rockets. He is now on the Milwaukee Bucks. What does this mean for Milwaukee shoring up their sprint towards a world championship finally?
There's a huge question mark about how much does 35-year-old PJ Tucker still have left in the tank. He did not look good this year in Houston. So a lot of the desire that was out there for him is based on things he's done in the past. In previous years, it's kind of on the name. This does feel like a name trade, right? Like, this feels like we know it's somewhere in him. We're hoping we get it. Yeah, you're hoping it's still there. The good news is PJ Tucker has never gotten by on, top level athleticism. He's not a high flyer. He's not fast. He's just a big, strong, compact dude who knew how to shoot enough. That kind of went away this year. So you hope some of that comes back, but he understood leverage, angles, playing with grit, hustling his butt off, good communicator on defense. Those things aren't going to go away. So I think he can only help them. It was really in their benefit that all they had to give up in order to get him was DJ Augustine, a guy who is a solid NBA backup, but you were able to fill in that with Bryn Forbes playing some point guard minutes and Dante DiVincenzo playing some backup point guard minutes behind Drew Holiday. You can cover that. And then DJ Wilson, a guy who in flashes has shown some upside as a young forward, but didn't really have a path forward and hadn't won a job there yet. And he's been on that team like 3-4 years. So that's the type of guy that you give to Houston and you go, you guys figure out whether he's got an NBA future. And then you get PJ Tucker in as a more proven commodity. So I think it can only help. He's a trusted guy who's been in those situations before. He's good for 6 fouls, and a competent 6 fouls if you're going to put him in.
I haven't heard that strategy in a while.
I'm not saying he's a stiff, I'm not saying he's a stiff by any means, but, he came out, he played like 13, 15 minutes in his debut, had 0 points, grabbed a couple rebounds. He's going to feel out the situation. He's going to take some of the defensive onus off of Giannis, off of Drew Holiday. And if you get more than that, you're happy. I think the message, though, and I hope, Milwaukee may still have a move or two left in them. The message still to Giannis is we are not sparing any expense. We are not leaving any stone unturned, trying to get you help and the type of help that you need. So a lot of this just comes down to, can PJ Tucker hit the broadside of a barn from the corner 3 again? He was like under 25% a lot of the season in Houston. That's awful. But he's been better than that through his career. And you just wonder, maybe his head wasn't and his heart wasn't really in the game when everything was falling apart. First with Harden kind of quitting on the team, and then post Harden, the team being that terrible and going in a younger direction.
I got to be honest with you. The fact that we get to look at PJ Tucker and say, yeah, I mean, he can hack a dude a few times, right? He's fine. Like, he can get that for you.
Those are the fouls, though, conceivably, that Giannis doesn't pick up. That true. Brooke Lopez doesn't pick up. There is value in that.
And there is also the value in saying to Giannis, hey, look, we're trying. We're trying to give you some pieces within the framework of what we can do and what we do also do to sort of make this work and to make you happy, to make you also see that we're serious about going for a world title because, we just gave you a bunch of money to do that. So, Joe, before we get to our last story, if you wanted to put PJ Tucker on one of your daily fantasy teams, I mean, there's no.
I wouldn't recommend it, friend.
There's no stats for fouls, but according to Joel, he'd rack up for you.
Yeah, you want to be smarter than PJ Tucker in your fantasy lineup. He's one of those classic guys who will not get you stats, but will get you wins. And if you're betting on teams, maybe you start betting on the Bucks a little bit more, because that's where the needle might be moved from a guy like PJ Tucker. And of course, if you're going to, lay down some money on some of these hunches, why not get a deposit bonus of up to $1,000 with that first deposit? Because it's a thing, and you can get it from DraftKings.com thanks to our partnership with them and the Brawl Network. All you got to do is create a new DraftKings Sportsbook account, make your first deposit minimum of $5, new customers only. DraftKings will match 20% of your deposit amount up to $1,000 total. And then from there, you pick your games, you pick your markets, you pick your players, all sorts of different options. And you don't just have to bet on basketball. You can bet on basically any sport under the sun. It's probably available at DraftKings Sportsbook. And of course, if you want to do us a solid, and we'd appreciate that, use the special link dkng.co/brawlbook. That's dkng.co/brawlbook. When you do that, you hopefully win, DraftKings wins, Brawl Network wins, and we win here at BbA.
I should let you know that thanks to DraftKings, I'm on this Baylor -6.5 against Wisconsin in the round of 32 game.
High fives.
We got 16 seconds. Baylor's up 11 and shooting free throws. That's what we're hanging tight on. So, Joe, we sort of alluded to it a couple of times throughout this podcast, and it's coming up in 4 days from when we're this recording. Is that the trade deadline is amongst us almost? What do you expect to see happen? Do you expect ginormous movement? Do you expect big moves? Do you expect teams to sort of fortify their chances that are already contending for the championship? Are we destined for big moves or tiny moves or a bunch in between? Joe, what can we expect? Please, Nostra Cortez, tell us what to see.
I think we'll see a bunch of medium-sized moves, but the big names who have been out there, Andre Drummond, Kevin Love, LaMarcus Aldridge, some of these former all-star guys who are still on big contracts, I don't think you see those guys move because they've lost leverage. It's already been out there for a while that those teams, especially the Cavaliers, are looking for deals for those veterans. The fact that they haven't found said deal yet may just mean that other teams are waiting. They've got a deal in, kind of a backup. It's a contingency, and they're saying, hey, just wait. we'll come back, we'll revisit this. So there is that possibility. But the fact that Love and Aldridge especially have dealt with injury issues. Love has not been able to prove himself healthy. They're still on big deals. Drummond, very capable player, but on a huge contract and is just not a modern NBA center. And the fact that more teams than you think are pretty comfortably set at their center position in today's NBA, for as much as we malign the position, there's not a lot of teams out there who are like hard up for a starting center right now. So the market just hasn't been there. I think those guys, it winds up being buyout city for them. And then we're talking, rather than like a week from now, we're talking 2 weeks from now about where they're landing. But medium type of moves, the Harrison Barneses of the world, veteran players who are on teams that are probably not making the playoffs, this is the time where they start to, cut bait. Somebody like Orlando, maybe finally breaking up what you can call that core, whether it's Aaron Gordon, Evan Fournier, maybe even Nick Vucevic, but there again, that's another center. But especially Fournier and Gordon, those are players at the wing and forward positions who are stretchy enough, who could really help a contending team. And if you can get the numbers to work out, you could make something happen. Somebody from like Oklahoma City, some of the veterans who have been banished there for better terms. Al Horford has lost a lot of his shine, but has played well in his minutes there. George Hill still could be productive. Those are the guys who magically wind up back on playoff rosters after a trade deadline. And then, as we've talked about before, Toronto having to do some soul searching. Do they go big and try to get Andre Drummond in there and save their season, or try to swing a deal for Victor Oladipo, who I think is very, very, very available still? Do you go that route, or do you break it up? I don't think they break it up yet. You wait till the offseason for that at this point. So you maybe try to make one more move to bring somebody in and see what you can get. So those are the type of deals and just some of the names that we're looking around. JJ Redick is another, playoff caliber shooter. The Pelicans have been in the playoff hunt. They would conceivably need a guy like Redick, but he kind of has fallen out just because he hasn't played that well. His age looks like it's catching up. He has played for Stan Van Gundy before, but it seems like they're a little frustrated with each other, and he may be looking for a role on a team that's maybe a little closer to a championship, because this could be the end of the line. This could be the last season for JJ Redick, or second to last. So those are some names to watch. I think if somebody called up Houston and said, hey, John Wall has looked healthy, we'd love to get him, they would ship out Wall in a heartbeat. I don't think that call is coming yet, even though he has looked better. Because again, most of the contending teams right now don't need a point guard upgrade. And John Wall he's going to have to prove he's healthy for multiple seasons.
What are the chances we see a deal, was it Thursday, that makes us go, wow?
The only teams that I could see needing to do that and maybe having the assets to do it would be Boston, for the reasons we spoke about before, the Lakers, for the reasons we spoke about before, and possibly the Clippers, because the chemistry still just doesn't seem to be where it is. So a deal involving Ibaka or Zubats, if they say we're going to try to clear some space and bring Andre Drummond aboard and change the calculus there a little bit, that would be a big deal. Lou Williams has looked like a shell of himself, and Luke Kennard hasn't been able to pick up the scraps behind Paul George. I don't know if those are wow deals, but certainly changing things up front. Would the Clippers, and this is pure speculation on my part, but with their mojo, their juju being just off, it seems like again this year, would they consider a deal that ships out Paul George and build a team solely around Kawhi Leonard or whatever other superstar you could get? And does Paul George, despite having some difficult seasons under his belt the last couple of years when it comes to playoff stuff, does he have the type of value that would fetch you, a top 10, top 15 player in return? That I don't know, but that's the sort of thing that maybe would make me go, wow. But I wouldn't put it past the Clippers, because are they really confident even with what's happening to the Lakers right now, are they really confident that they're going to be able to pass the Lakers, the Jazz, and the Suns and get out of the Western Conference and finally get to the NBA Finals? The talent's there, but those are the questions that management will have to answer. I think those are the teams you keep an eye on for something big. I don't think somebody like Portland or Phoenix or Utah messes with their chemistry, because small market teams like that, it takes so long to get things to where you want it to be that once it's there, and it relatively is for those teams, I don't think you mess with it by shuffling the deck that hard.
Oh, Phoenix especially, I would think. Like, I think Phoenix will be number one on that list. Like, hey, this boat's floating.
That's a perfect way to put it.
I'm not interested in taking this thing ashore anytime soon. So, y'all be real out there. We're not making phone calls. We're not taking them either.
One other team, and I don't think they will do this, I just think it's been wishful thinking by certain writers in that circle. One team that could make us go wow is if the Golden State Warriors pull a big trade involving either Andrew Wiggins or Kelly Oubre. They've been good enough to be in the playoff hunt. That team has had injury issues. Draymond went out the other night. He's out for a little while. Steph Curry's dealing with a dinged-up injury. Kevon Looney is back now. Weissman has been in and out of the lineup, so it's not really a fair assessment. Wiggins has been solid for them, and Oubre has been solid, but those two guys were acquired specifically with the idea that they were placeholders, right? They were placeholders either to move on to a bigger deal, like what happened when D'Angelo Russell was there, or placeholders until you get Klay Thompson back and you figure out whether he's still Klay Thompson or not anymore. So if the right deal came along and somebody wants one of those young wings, that would be a big deal and probably fetch a fairly big name in return. But I don't think Golden State messes with that, because both of those guys have proven they can fit. And I am a big believer in Golden State when they're all healthy. That just hasn't happened yet this year.
I am very interested to see something we haven't talked about at all this year. What new Klay Thompson looks like. Because I feel like it's been forever since we've seen him. And dude's just, when it comes to Achilles and stuff, it's a tough recover. Guys just usually aren't the same. So,
and here's what you have to be looking for in Klay's place with that specific player. He's always going to be able to shoot. He will be a knockdown shooter for the rest of his time in the NBA, and hopefully it's a long and productive time. But Klay Thompson was also that team's lead defender at the wing spot, right? Draymond Green would take the opponent's best big. Klay Thompson always took the best guards that Steph did not have to. And that may be too tall of a task for Klay Thompson when he returns. That's where, though, having a guy like Kelly Oubre, who has like a 1,200-foot wingspan, and has been a lead defender at other places in Washington and Phoenix, that's where he makes a ton of sense. That's where Andrew Wiggins makes less sense if you're keeping Oubre and you've got Klay Thompson in the mix. That's where Wiggins may not need to be there anymore, especially with his larger contract too. So those are the decisions, and I don't think Klay's going to be a lead defender, but I do think they've been trying out some of those younger wings that they have there in the mix to see if they got something out of that, and I do believe Oubre could fill that role for sure. Him and Draymond Green and Wiseman up front, or Looney, that still is a really nice defensive group to trot out next to Curry and Thompson, who are going to be able to drain threes even if they're out there playing on one leg and roller skates.
Joel Cordes has been our friend, as always, during this time. Joel, thank you so much.
Hey, it's my pleasure. And episode 53 in the books. Thank you, Daryl Dawkins, for doing your Dr. Dunk stuff. Of course, and I say this at the end of every show, if you're listening to us on Spotify, on iTunes, wherever you get your podcast, first of all, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. If you want to check out the video edition, you can find us on YouTube. Just search Basketball by Association or BbA. And then, of course, give us a like, give us a subscribe, a share, all that good stuff. If you're on the video version and you want the audio, you can find us wherever you find podcasts, and we would love to have you.
Come say hello as well. Spotify, Amazon, whatever. Rate, review, share. That's all I got to do. That's all we ask. We ask $0, 0 cents, but a little bit of share. Joel, we will see you for the BbA. Bye, buddy.
Bon voyage.
Ahoy, matey.